Welcome to the Journey to Wellness podcast, sponsored by the Essential Wellness Society and Healing Wheel Holistic. I'm Melissa Stonehill Caiyem, and I will be your host. With over 40 years experience in the health and fitness industry, I am ready to dive in to some of the most conflicting topics we have regards to health today. Let's go. Welcome to the Journey to Wellness podcast. I'm so excited about today's show. I have Shannon Amrein, and the things we're going to talk about, this is a deep dive down the rabbit hole of just mysticism and spiritual connection and healing Lyme disease. How can that all be intertwined? But it is intertwined, and this is what I find so fascinating. So I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about yourself and who is Shannon Amrein?
All right. Well, thank you for having me, first off. It's great to be here. So I, as my human Shannon, who I am, I do a lot of spiritual work. So I have a long story that brought me to doing this. I have a long history of disease as a child and nothing really helping essentially in the normal medical world. And so I started trying different spiritual, energetic healing techniques. And that brought me to the work I do today, which I'm a shaman. I do Earth and Star Shamanism. I do Akashic Records work, which is basically lots of past life and multidimensional work. And I am a biomagnetism practitioner, and biomagnetism is it's a therapy for the body that helps rebalance basically the magnetic field of our body using really high strength magnets. So all of those things kind of together have become part of who I am. I guess I just told you what I do and not who I am.
Right, but this is fine because we're going to unpack all of that really slowly. So where I'm going to reel that back is, first of all, how many young people find that they're in a medical situation and then start reaching out to alternative complementary therapies? I mean, that's pretty unique in its own. Did you have influence? Was there someone in your family? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's super important because my mom, very much thanks to her that I do this. So she got really into spiritual work. So as a kid, I'm going to dial back a little further. As a kid, I lived in India. I grew up in a significant part of my childhood. I lived in Bangalore, India, which is in the south. And when we were there, my mom got super into the traditions of there's so much ancient work there, And so she did yoga training there. She did different Ayurvedic cleanses and journeys and all these kind of things. She really started doing that work. And so when I got sick, I had already been super exposed to that. She brought me to things as a kid. She got me attuned to Reiki when I was 14.
That's really cool.
I had a lot of influence already in that space. And then when I got sick, we started down the normal Western allopathic route. And when it wasn't working, she was one who said, okay, let's try some of this other stuff because why not? And I know what it is.
So I want to let the audience know what the illness was because, we had talked previously and you had mentioned Lyme disease. And some people don't know what that is. Those that do know wish they never knew.
Very true.
It comes from a deer tick, mostly, right?
That's kind of the conventional belief. There's a lot of evidence that yes, that's probably the most commonplace, but it comes from, you can get it from mosquitoes, you can get it from a lot of other bugs, other ticks can give it to you as well. It's most prevalent on the East Coast and on places where there's a lot of deer ticks, but you can get it just as easily, but you have pretty significant risk of getting it anywhere that there are ticks, even if they're not deer ticks.
So from what I understand is you're bitten by the insect or the tick.
Yeah.
It festers a little bit. It's not caught right away. Then there's like a red ring that's usually around the area of entrance. But what I know as a practitioner, when people have come to me that are sick from Lyme's disease, they have been battling it decades. Like there's people that are so sick, they've tried everything. They explain it as if you were walking around with mononucleosis like all the time, tired, fatigue. Some people can't put muscle on. Some people find that they have no appetite, aches and pains in the joints. Is this correct?
That is totally correct. And then there's all the neurological symptoms if you've had it for a long time, because it will eventually cross that blood-brain barrier. And then there's the brain fog and I got so sick at certain points that I first realized I was getting really sick when I went on a trip to see, I'm bilingual, I speak French, and I went on a trip to France to see friends, and I couldn't speak. I was like, wow. I could barely say a word in French. And then not even that long later, I'd already started treatment, but I was just it wasn't working. I was getting worse, and I started to forget how to speak English. And I'd like, oh man, I would be like trying to say something, and then I just had no words. Didn't even remember how to move my mouth. So when it gets into the neurological, it's just, I used to describe it as feeling like I had been run over by a dump truck and had just continued to back over me and like go back and forth like 10 times every day.
Wow, that's quite a description.
Like. Yeah.
It's horrible. And you were so young. How old were you when you got sick?
We've been able to trace it back to probably the first time I got bit was when I was 10. And then I started to get really sick at 15. And then I became pretty much non-functional sick at 18, 19.
And those are such hard years.
Yeah.
You know, those are such formative years in your teenage life. And did you experience depression or a feeling of separation?
Oh, definitely. One, because of the neurological effects, like it just really got in the brain. And so depression skyrocketed. I had a lot of anxiety. But also because when I got to the point of being like non-functional anymore, I was in college and I was an athlete. And I had to stop. I had to quit, like completely lose my identity as an athlete, completely lose my identity as a student, and just stop everything. So
that's so hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard. And, you know, I find that the greatest healers are those that have found a healing path for themselves after dealing with illness. Yeah. So I find that like when you talk about it, those that are listening, if you're suffering from something like this, like when you talk to someone who has healed themselves and they can be like, yes, I understand what you're saying. Yes, I went through what you're going through. And now here I am and I'm going to help you. There's so much more buy-in. So rather than, I'm not putting down credentials are great. But what speaks volumes to me is not so much the letters behind the name, but when someone like you can say, I've been there. Yeah. I get it. I know how you feel. Let me help you. Yeah. So now, like, let's transition to what worked.
So this is such a crazy story. I'm going to try and put it in the short version because it's going to be very long. I withdrew from school and I went home to get treatment because nothing was working. And so when I went home was New Hampshire. I'm from New Hampshire. And when I got home, my mom said, I found this new therapy that is supposed to be really great for Lyme. Would you try it? And I said, sure, like nothing to lose. And that was Biomagnetism, which is one of the things I do now. And so I went to that first appointment, and the practitioner, who has become a very important mentor of mine, she did all this testing and she put all these magnets on me. I looked crazy. I looked like a robot. And when I was done, I went into a deep Herx reaction. So a Herx reaction is die-off in the body. For anyone who doesn't know, it's very unpleasant, very common with Lyme and treatments with Lyme. And we continued to do that for the next few weeks. And then my mom said, I have this workshop I'm going to in a couple of weekends, and it's quantum EFT, emotional freedom technique tapping. And she is a trained EFT practitioner. So she was like, I'm going to go to this. Would you like to come with me? And I'd done a lot of EFT with her. And I said, sure, why not? Again, what do I have to lose? So she took me to this weekend workshop, and we do the quantum EFT, and we each had our own session, and mine was the last. And this was the first place I was introduced to the Akashic realm, because we tapped into the Akasha, all the multidimensional like layers of our souls when we were doing this tapping. And so we were all having these past life experiences. My mom went right before me, and she had this past life experience about a woman that she'd been trying to save who died during childbirth. And I was listening to my mom, and I was like, that was me. And so I they change. It's now my turn. We're all watching each other's tapping sessions and tapping along. And that was the first thing I said was my mom's experience. Like, I was part of that. And so we go through, and I had this life where I died, and we do the work with it. And there was all this family stuff tied in. And that tapping session took 30 minutes. And when we were done, I looked at the woman who facilitated it, and they said, I don't have Lyme disease anymore. And then I went home, grabbed my brother, we went canoeing, and we were sitting there on the lake. And this was just such like a very pivotal moment for me. And I looked at him, and I was like, I don't have Lyme disease anymore. And then I went and saw my biomagnetism therapist, and she tested me, and she was like, you had 18 months to 2 more years of treatment just for Lyme, and it's all gone. It's cleared. And so that was the moment where I was like, wow, I just tapped into something insane. And I don't even know how it happened. But I then spent the next few years studying it to figure out what I did so that I could help other people. Because I was like, if I can go from like dying, which was the agreed upon prognosis that everyone had for me at that point in time, to spontaneous remission in 30 minutes, I've got to figure out how to do that for other people.
Well, a couple of things that you said that I really love. First of all, I love that you said, I don't know what happened, because I think when people think that they know what happened, that's where it falls apart in a way, like not knowing, but accepting. Like, you don't know what happened, but you accept that it happened.
Right.
And that was your first step. For
the
people,
belief
right.
Yeah.
But for people who don't know what EFT is, what it does, it's a bilateral stimulation. So when you're tapping, you're going right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. And what this does is this unlocks the brain. So if the brain is stuck in fear, or if the brain is stuck in whatever narrative you have of disease, or maybe I am sick, or I am Lyme's disease, or whatever the I am that you've told yourself that gets stuck in the brain, they've used this a lot too to change people's set point and weight loss.
Yeah.
You know,
there's some really amazing stuff that's been done with EFT.
Right.
Yeah.
I did it for a little bit with the fear of flying, and found that the bilateral stimulation I was also getting, I cycle. Yeah. And when I would ride and pump right, left on the bike and the pedals, I was getting some of the greatest thinking done and coming to these incredible conclusions.
Oh, amazing.
And so EFT can be very, very effective. It's also very intense.
Yes, it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a lot out of you emotionally. I mean, you're unsticking your brain, basically.
Yeah, I've never really had an EFT session where I didn't cry through most of it, because
it's pretty intense.
It's unsticking. So
stories. You mentioned that, and you talked about the magnets, and I'm very, very interested in the magnets. Now you are a practitioner of the magnetic therapy. Is that correct?
I am, yes.
So are they different shapes? Are they different sizes? Do you work with people with TMJ? Do you work with people physically having ailments, emotional? Like, what's your perfect client?
My perfect client is literally anyone who wants to do it, honestly, because there is pretty much not a single person I've met who could not benefit from the magnets, because what they do is, like I said earlier, they help the body rebalance itself. So they are really helpful with helping the body rebalance pH, which then stimulates the immune system, which then helps us release pathogens that we're holding on to. So there's all these different sizes of magnets. They're all really strong. They're at least 1,000 Gauss or more, which is a very strong magnet. Like a magnet you have on like your refrigerator is probably like 100 Gauss. So,
right. And Gausses are the
how
measurements
you measure
of electromagnetic fields.
Yeah.
In case someone's wondering, what's a Gauss? It's not a mouse. It's a Gauss.
So biomagnetic paratherapy or biomagnetism was discovered, just a brief history, in the 80s by a doctor in Mexico, Dr. Goyas, and he had a patient with HIV who came to him, and obviously at that point there was like no medicine at all, nothing that really could be done, and he had the idea to try these really strong magnets on his body to work with the field, and he placed one magnetic pair on this man, and he kept it there for like 15 minutes, I think. And then this person walked out of his office and never tested positive, never had blood tests that showed the HIV in his blood anymore.
So it's like it works deep into a cellular level.
Yeah, it stimulates the immune system, and so now there's hundreds of pairs that go different places on the body, and they correspond to different spaces where pathogens live in the body. And so anytime you put a pair down, it's connected into the frequency of where a pathogen is living, and it will stimulate the immune system to then bring all the white blood cells to that space and get rid of the pathogen.
Right. And you spoke about this shedding.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people experience this, like even if they go on a anti-candida diet or something like that. There's this shedding, from what I understand, what I felt myself, and I've seen others go through. It almost feels like flu-like symptoms. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Herx reaction, the shedding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it feels a flu is a good.
So then you would
example.
then maybe go on a detox or do some sort of antioxidants, or
honestly, with the biomagnetism, it is so gentle on the body.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if someone's like really sick, like me, I was so sick that I did have reactions from it. But I didn't do anything beyond binders, maybe like charcoal or something.
Okay.
And a lot of water, Epsom salt baths. But most people, if I'm doing a session on them, I'm asking the body to tell me when to stop, because I don't want to get to the point where I'm triggering a Herx in someone or shedding, like die-off reaction, because it's not pleasant. And so if I can stop right before that's gonna happen, then we can get the maximum that the body can then process and release by itself without putting the body into like overdrive.
Right. Yeah. And some people call this a healing crisis. Mm-hmm. And that is the darkest hour before the dawn, you know. And if you experience something like that and you're going through a process of healing, it's almost, oh, this is great. You know, you're going through this
you're like
hard
happy
time
about it because it means it's working.
You're going to feel so good next week.
Yeah.
Right. It's like going off coffee and you have like the massive migraine and
but you know it's going to be worth it.
Right.
Yeah.
So now let's dive deeper.
Yes.
Okay, because you used a few words that when I looked at your bio, I also wrote it down. So I'm going to read from what I read, because I was like, this is so cool. What is it? Council of the Pinnacle, the Council of Light that exists in the rainbow realm, the 23rd dimension, the prismatic connection of all universal points.
Yeah, so I think to explain that, I need to go back. So I work in the Akashic Records. That's part of the work I do today. And the Akashic Records, for anyone who doesn't know, is the records are basically often described as like a library of all of the information that every soul has ever experienced. So it's like any life, any collective energy, any generational, ancestral karma or what have you, all of that exists in the Akashic Records. So we each have our own record, and there's a lot of work we can do in the records to release old patterns, old beliefs, old energies. And so I started working in the records when about 3 years after that spontaneous remission from Lyme, I got sick again. I came out of remission and I went, okay, I've healed myself before. So I'm going to do it again because I have no desire to go to a doctor besides going to my biomagnetism therapist. And so I spent about 2 months. I was actually in the Rockies. I was like spent the summer in the mountains, and I just went deep into meditation, deep into everything I'd pieced together that had happened before. And I healed myself again. I went back and got tested, and it was gone within 2 months. And I realized at that point, Akasha, like those words were like flowing into my consciousness all the time. So I started figuring out how to access the records. And when I went into them, I went into this new part of the record. So what you read a couple minutes ago is what the part of the records I work in. So the records, normally they're worked in like the 5th, 7th, 8th dimensions. They're worked in closer to the earth. I work in the records. I was brought into them. I really just was brought into it. Like there's no other explanation for it than that. In the 23rd plus dimensions. And so the 23rd dimension of the Akashic Records is this really quantum space where we can access, we can not only access all of our soul work and all of our soul history, but we could also really tap into the healing abilities of the Akashic Records. Like, so I don't read the records just to like give you a yes or no answer, to give you like channeled information. I go into the records to like, let's go do work and move this energy and get this out of your energy body and your lineage and all the things. And so
does this come to you more in a meditative state?
It did at first. Now I've been doing it for so long. It's just, if I want to tap into it, I do.
You have a way to access this.
I have a way to access it. Yeah, I do teach it at this point now too, because it's just a whole other way of working in the Akashic field. And the 23rd, it's called the rainbow realm, because the rainbow, if you think of a rainbow, it's like, and again, this is all channeled. This is what I received. So when you think of a rainbow, it's where all colors come together, right, and they meld in together. And in the same way, in terms of the Akashic energy, the 23rd dimension is really where all energy from all dimensions, all planets, all timelines, everything come in together there, just like the colors of a rainbow come in together. And then the Council of the Pinnacle are the guides and the records that I do healing work with.
So it's almost like this vortex where all things meet.
Yeah, like a vortex, like a realm, like a void. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is so interesting. Because when I read about you, I was like, that's amazing. So I can't we can't not discuss this.
Right.
Because, you wrote it, you put it, that this is who you are, this is about you. And first of all, it's amazing. I'm looking at you now. You just look so healthy and vital and beautiful. And knowing that you went through Lymes disease and mentioning that you came out of remission, which must have been really scary at first, like, oh no, not this again. So I'm going to ask you, do you know, was there an emotional situation? Was there something that you think was the catalyst to you coming out of remission?
Yes, there are several things. So the reason I do the work in the records is because I found that when someone has such a deep battle with disease like I did, there's a bunch of stuff going on current life, but there's almost always ancestral and past life stuff going on. And so I use the records to connect into that. And I say that because when I went out of remission, I knew I had some pretty major past life energy that we started to work on when I had my spontaneous remission, some of the past life work I did there, but it wasn't resolved. I had, and I just had a lot of misalignment in my life. Like I was, which is the other thing I think Lyme does for us. So I like to think of what does it do for me, not what does it how does it harm me, more how does it help me? And so it was helping me by showing me, yeah, this job isn't working. This is not what I want to do. I was in a relationship that wasn't working. That's not going to work anymore. The way I was like approaching life, I hadn't fully processed what had happened to me, like how sick I was, how I just like went from sick to healthy in a day. Like, I hadn't really processed that, and it was eating away at how I was living, because I was still living like I was like about to die any day. Like, and so there's all these things that emotionally built up in my body again, to the point where it tipped me back over into illness, which is really what I see, and how I believe like that kind of chronic illness works too, is it's like our body can fight the pathogens if it's healthy emotionally and we don't have a lot of stress and all that stuff, or if we're aligned in our life. Like, we're being exposed to pathogens by all being in here together right now, right? But then when we have so much stuff built up, it's like we reach that tipping point, or like the straw that's going to break the camel's back, and then we like somersault into illness again. And so that's what happened to me with going out of remission.
Do you feel like, I've worked with people that have had eating disorders, and they always felt like it was the monster in the closet, that, should things not go well, or there be a big disappointment in life, that this monster might come out of the closet. Do you feel it's that way with something like Lyme's disease in your experience?
I think for a lot of people it is. For me, it's not anymore. And the reason it's not is because I'm not scared of it anymore. I think when it's the monster in the closet, actually not even, I know when we're using that terminology or thought process, we're still scared of it. Like, I have gotten little reinfections in the last few years. Never made me sick because it's normal. Like, I'm from the Northeast. Like, there's ticks everywhere. Get around dogs. Dogs get Lyme disease all the time. We can get it from our pets. Like, so now I know that if I get it reinfected, if I'm starting to feel the symptoms, doesn't happen often, but if it does, I just need to sit and I need to go do my healing work. I need to go ask what's wrong. Where am I out of alignment? What have I allowed to build up that I need to go heal and work through? And also, let me throw some magnets on my body. And with those two things together, 24 hours from now, I'm going to be fine.
So it sounds like, as a practitioner, from what I'm feeling from you, is that you get great joy in teaching people how to help themselves.
Yes. I love to help people, but what I really want with everyone I work with is them to finish our time together and feel like, yeah, I can do this. Like, I'm not scared of what's going on anymore. Like, we're friends. I'm friends with whatever has been happening to me, whatever I've been working through, and I have the tools to now deal with that when it shows up, because we're human. Like, it's going to show up again. It's going to cycle in a new way. We don't have to just meet it the same way, though. We can meet it as like, hey friend, like, what do you have to teach me? And then you can go again.
That's great.
Yeah.
So those that are listening or watching, describe what it's like to work with you. Does someone call up and get a phone call, a discovery call? Like, how does it work with you?
Yeah. It really depends on the person. It's so funny. I do have options when people reach out where we can jump on a call and connect and see if my energy is right for them and their energy is right for me. And then if it is, we talk about, what do we want to do? Do we want to do Akashic work? Do we want to do shamanic work, which is a whole other aspect of my work? Do we want to do biomagnetism work? Do we want to do all three? Like, what do you need? What's going on? Or sometimes people just like come in, they're like, we're gonna do this, and we don't even talk. We just feel into the energy and we like exchange an email, and it's like, oh right, yeah, this is the right thing.
So basically somebody would call you, they would connect with you, and within that connection you would map out what was the right thing. So I have two other questions for you. One, we did not talk about the shamanism yet. That's why I said we are diving down a deep hole. We have so many things to discover here, because this woman sitting next to me is so multifaceted. And as young as you are, I can only imagine that this is just going to grow and grow and grow within you. So it's so impressive to me, when I meet young women who just know where they're going, so that's wonderful. tell me about the shamanistic journey.
Yeah. So, where to start? So, in 2020, year that so much changed for all of us, right? I had been I've been getting messages all the time in my records and in my meditations and all of this to study shamanism. And so I was looking, doing some research, and I really wanted to do Celtic shamanism because that's my ancestral background. Mm-hmm. And randomly, it was complete synchronicity, which for anyone who has done any kind of spiritual work, that's usually how it happens. It's just like this random universe brings it together for you. I found the woman who became my teacher, and I reached out to her, and we got on a call, and it was just an immediate, this is who I'm supposed to learn from. And so I've been trained in kind of a hybrid of Celtic shamanism. That's also I've learned some aspects of North American shamanic work, but I don't consider myself like a North American shaman because that's more of an indigenous space. Then that's not my ancestry, but I've learned some of what they believe and do just to have a well-rounded understanding of all types of shamanism. My training also included Norse shamanic practices because I have ancestral connections there. And then the last part of my training was doing star shamanic work, which is doing multidimensional traveling up into dimensions well beyond this planet, this galaxy, anything that we can visualize or conceptualize.
And how is a shaman different than a healer?
So the way I describe it is, the way I understand it and try to explain it is that to call yourself a shaman, there are specific trainings and practices and initiations to go into. So one of the most well-known ways of or parts of a shamanic journey is the shamanic death, which most shamanic traditions have it's not even fully it's like requirements too human of a word because that implies that it has to happen. It's like an initiation where anyone called to a shamanic path will have a death at some point. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's both. And so one of the things that my teacher said to me when we first started working together was, part of the reason we can do this work and start where we are is because you've already had your death. And that was the Lyme disease. So that's one thing with shamanic work is there's a defined death period that happens. And then shamanism comes from these ancient traditions. And so it's about, I say to call myself a shaman, I had to go through deep training, whereas I was already calling myself a healer before then, and I was training by myself, getting my own downloads, doing my own work, and that was me being a healer. Me being a shaman was learning from someone else who passed down knowledge to me from generations and generations and generations and generations before me.
One thing I do know about the Irish culture in general is if you trace herbalism way back to its roots, no pun intended, but the women that were experimenting with herbs, it basically started in Ireland.
Yeah.
And these were the first women that were designated as witches and things like that. And they were really just trying to create medicine from the earth.
Yeah.
And that kind of, I feel like it flows a little bit with the shamanism because it, that earth medicine, that earth connection to medicine. So that's really a big deal. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you is about your guides, because you had mentioned guides before. Do you have animal guides?
I do. So in my shamanic work, I work a lot with animals, and I work with bear, lynx, and hummingbird. Those are my three main
Wow.
animal
And they're all so
guides.
different.
They're all so different. Bear is pretty much always present. Lynx and hummingbird come in when they need to. So bear is my main guide. And then I work with other guides as they come through as well. Like we talked about the Council of the Pinnacle, which they're more star being guides, and even talking about plants. Like plants come in sometimes as guides and have things to say and messages to share. So yeah,
there's a lot of frequencies and energies that come from plants.
So much. That's something I love to learn about. It's not something I think I'm here to share, but getting to learn from people who have so much knowledge about it, I absolutely love, because they're so healing. Plants are amazing.
Well, this conversation has been so much fun for me, because this is just the knowledge and learning about things that I had no idea about, which I love. And I hope the people that are listening will learn a lot too. So if someone wants to work with you, learn more from you, how do they connect with you?
Easiest ways to reach out to me are either via my website, which is Shannon Amrein. That's Amrein at ShannonAmrein.com. I almost said my email address. ShannonAmrein.com, or on Instagram or Facebook, which both the places to reach out to me there is Shannon Amrein.
Okay, so it's your name.
It's my name. It's just website or social media. It's all under the same name.
And today we're transmitting from the Essential Wellness Society brick and mortar here off of Austin Bluffs in the beautiful Colorado Springs, where you have an office here, don't you?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so what's your suite number?
It's Suite 105.
Suite 105 at the Essential Wellness Society building. And you can find us on our website, essentialwellnesssociety.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
See you next week.